record right now, and we're live recording.
Great, great. So, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, this morning for most of us, this afternoon for, well, probably this evening for Andrew, actually.
It's afternoon. It's 4 o'clock right here.
4 o'clock. So coming from the UK. So I'm Gretchen from the Career Center. For those of you that I don't know, when this pandemic happened, Andrew actually reached out to me maybe the first day, I think. It sure feels like it, and said, hey, I've been working remotely since you graduated from CC in 2016, and tips, and I know what I'm doing, so how can I help? And my heart just like soared, because this is why I work at CC, because of alumni like this that are always willing to jump in at that last minute and be like, what can I do? So I waited for a little bit to figure out exactly how we could use this, and we thought that this would be really good timing now. Yes, I know some of you have been in class working remotely, but some of you will be going off to jobs pretty soon. Some of you will be going off to internships, and this could very well be the way of our world for, who knows, right? It could be a good long while. Could also be something that you might negotiate that you want to do. There's some of us that are really at home and really love it. Me, the extrovert, I'm sort of dying, but making it through. It's going to be fine. So anyway, Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you, just because I know that you've got a lot to say, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself. But for everybody else, thank you for being here. And Andrew, thank you for doing this for us.
Perfect. Well, thanks for the introduction. And I'm going to pull up my screen share. I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself in a moment. But essentially what we're looking at talking about today, remote work 101, basics of remote work. You know, what do you want to think about? Some habits, some tricks, some tips, some things that you can do basically immediately, you know, to live a good remote work life. So quick overview, sort of what I was going to go through with you guys, a little bit about me, a little bit about my company, Optimotive, and then just going to talk about some habits with remote work. Communication with teams and with other people you're working with, a little bit about team culture and sort of what that looks like in a remote context, and then work-life balance, which of course, very important even in a non-remote context, but even more so important in a remote context. So let's just roll into it. So a little bit about myself. I currently am traveling full-time as a digital nomad. You might have heard of that term before. Basically means I don't own a house, I don't rent an apartment, I don't really have like a fixed place or a lease on a place that I'm living. And I've been living in Airbnbs and short-term apartments in different parts around the US and around the world for the last couple of years. Yeah, and it's a very different lifestyle than living in one place. Mainly, I focus on, well, really just growing the business and then also rock climbing. And like I said before, Optimotive is my company that I started 3 years ago with another CC grad, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So before this, I want to give you a little bit of insight. I think it's important to kind of see the journey of what a career path looks like. So for me, my career path, which is very zigzagging, and very much not a linear flow, was started out, I think my first really real job was being an intern at a very, very small startup doing creative marketing in Baltimore right after my sophomore year at CC. And I was working for an angel investor, basically as one of 3 employees at the company. And I was literally working out of his house in his living room, and had no idea what I was doing, but it was a fantastic learning opportunity, got me interested in marketing and business. So after that, I did a bunch of freelance marketing work while I was at CC, worked for like a dozen companies, different parts of the US while I was at CC. And that kind of led into getting hired at a small growth marketing agency in Denver when I graduated, worked there for a little while. And while I was working at that agency, I started a bunch of companies. So one of the things that you realize when you're an entrepreneur and you start companies is that you fail a lot, and it's just part of the process. So started more than 10 companies, different ventures. Most of them went nowhere. Some of them, you know, we started building it out, it just didn't work, or, you know, the people I was working with just didn't want to commit to the project, different reasons, but most of them failed. 2 succeeded though. One was a software company I started with some people I used to work with. Co-founded that. We raised about $250,000 and grew the company to like 10 people. And then I realized I wasn't passionate about it, so I left to focus on Optimotive, the other company I started, which is what I'm doing now. And we have been fortunate over the last couple of years to grow to a team of 10, operating with clients in different countries all around the world. And you can see here on the right, there's a map of my travels over here. You can get an idea of where I've been. Did a trip through Latin America by car, actually, from Canada down to Panama. And then I spent better part of the last 6 months in different parts of Europe, bouncing around to different countries. So enough about me. This is my company, Optimotive. We basically help clients launch and scale brands. Our focus is on ethical digital marketing, something we've been developing and pioneering as a concept this year. And most of the work we do is growth marketing, which if you're curious about that, you can go and look it up. And we work with a lot of e-commerce companies selling things online. So, and this is our team here. You can see me and Ben Criswell, the other founder of Optimotive. We started the company, and then right now our core marketing team, Alice, Pranit, and Emma. And some of you actually might know Emma. Emma is currently a senior at CC, and she's looking to join our team after graduating shortly. And Pranit went to CC, so we've got the strong CC connections. We're CC, these two are CC, and I believe our entire writing team went to CC as well. That creates content for us. Alice is the odd one out. She didn't go to CC, but she actually has some CC connections. So it's a CC success story, I guess. So cool. All right, enough about me and my company. Let's get into some of the details. So I want to start out by talking about habits and sort of what you want to do normally when you're working remotely. So first of all, it's important to plan your workspace. I think it's pretty straightforward. A couple key things, in your office, right? Because where you live, there's where you live, but also you want to set up a specific space to work in your living environment. So with whatever your office is going to be, whether you have, like a table, like right now I have a very small apartment. So this is literally my kitchen and my living room and my workspace at the same time. If you have, a bigger house or something, it's good to set up, like a specific room as just being your office. Really wanting to separate that work and living space as much as possible to create mental distance, if possible. Obviously, you want to be in an environment with no distractions, where people might, run in and go behind you if you're on a video call, or start talking if you're on the phone, or maybe you're trying to work and someone's cooking food or someone's working out in the corner. That's going to distract you, prevent you from doing good work. So you want to make sure you have no distractions. And the mental distance between where you're working and where you're living, it's interesting when you start living without a house, because I've been in situations where I've just been working out of the place that I'm living. I've also been in a lot of situations where even though I'm traveling, I will rent office space at co-working spaces, or I'll go to coffee shops to work when coffee shops are open, and work in places that are not my actual living space, because I really want to create that mental distance so that when I'm home, and I'm not, thinking about work. The danger with working remotely and working in your home is that work can start to bleed over into all of your personal life and your personal time. So, maybe it's after dinner and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm a really bad example because I work a lot. But you might get an email from somebody, and if your workspace is the same as your living space, you're like, oh, I'll just open up my computer, I'll just quickly respond to this. And sometimes there's a place for that, but most of the time it can wait. It can wait till later. So having that mental distance is big. You of course want to have a reliable internet connection. You don't want to drop out on calls or anything like that. You want to be able to do your work. I think that's pretty straightforward. And then one of the other important considerations is, if you're going to be working remotely, you're going to be on video calls most likely. And if you are, you want to make sure you look good. So clean background behind you. I actually have this little guy. You might have noticed this little colorful light thing. This is a speaker, and I've actually placed it behind me specifically because it stands out. And when I'm on calls with new potential clients or people I haven't met before, it's a good talking point. And people are like, what's that colorful thing behind you? And so I'm like, oh, that's actually a speaker. And I know that it's interesting. So I've kind of put an interesting thing in my background to help create the conversation. Depending on your professional environment, maybe you want to have something that's very clean, and there's not a lot going on. It's very straightforward. Or if you're in a more artistic environment, you can put other things behind you. But something to consider. And the other two things here, lighting and camera. You might notice the way that I'm looking directly at the camera. I've actually got my laptop elevated on a stand right here, which I don't know if I can show this, but it looks like this. And so if I don't have the stand, I'm looking more like this. And you can see the difference when it's pointed up at the ceiling. You know, it gives a different perception of you on camera. You know, when it's dead on with your eye level, you know, you look like a bigger person. You look more, you know, in control of your room. When you're looking down at something, it doesn't quite look as good. So that's a really easy trick. And if you don't have a stand for your laptop or, you know, a desktop computer, you can just put some books under your laptop and achieve the same effect. So really easy trick. Anybody can do that. And then also make sure that you have even lighting on camera as well. So I've actually got two light sources in front of me right here, and then a big window over to the side that's kind of lighting me from all sides. So I try to keep that even lighting, you know, especially talking in a sales context. It's really important that you want to look good, because looking good on camera is the only time people see you when you're working remotely. So you want to make sure that you look good.
Andrew, can I jump in for 1 second? Do you mind?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't know how many of you have really been on all these calls, but if you're in class or whatever, pay attention to those backgrounds. I think it's really important. I was talking to somebody just the other day that we were prepping for an interview coming up, and she's super excited about it. And she was really worried about, you know, this or her cat walking in and out. She's super worried about that. And I said, I'm less worried about that than your bed in the background that hasn't been made and you look sloppy.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you can see yourself on your screen. So really take a look at that, you know, pay attention to, you know, what's happening. But if it looks sloppy in the background, then you look sloppy. So, and it's, I know in our office, we kind of laugh about like, oh, what's going on back there? You know, Andrew's husband's making dinner right now. We can hear that. It's really important, and it can be quite distracting. So just keep an extra eye on that, because it is professional. It's not like you're just on a chat with friends, just kind of hanging out. So yeah. That's a little fun. Make you better.
Well, and it's good too, because, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's, you know, you don't want to just think about it like, well, make sure that nothing messy is behind you. I mean, obviously you want to do that, but it's also like you can show off who you are, and there's interesting things around you. Like immediately when we jumped on, I was like, Gretchen, you've got a huge clock behind you. Like that's super cool. You know, it's something to talk about. It's interesting. You can kind of see what other people's lives are like, and you can show off things about you in your background. Right. So it's just a good way to, you know, connect with people as well.
Yeah, totally. I know I've done a couple videos and my dogs have made appearances.
Yeah, so, and everybody loves when animals pop up on the on camera. So cool. So that's a little bit about the Workspace. A couple things, some tools recommended as far as like the technology that you're using. Fast computer, you know, so you can do work. I think most students at CC probably have a pretty fast computer. So, you know, maybe just make sure that, you know, your computer's fast enough to do the work that you need. Get a fast Wi-Fi router too. The thing is, if you have fast internet but a slow router, that's going to bottleneck all of your work. And so when you're working online, the speed of your connection is going to limit your productivity and also be really frustrating. So make sure you get a fast router. It helps to get a standalone mouse and a mouse pad. So I've got this mouse, the MX Master Logitech. This is really good, highly recommended. And I've got this mouse pad as well. The mouse pad basically means that you can put your laptop in any surface and the mouse won't jump around, and the mouse just, you know, helps protect your wrist so you're not on the trackpad, you know, cramped up all the time. It's just a good move for wrist health, I think, in general. And then a couple nice to have things, if you want to get like a really legit desk setup and get a nice elevated monitor with bigger screen so you're not, you know, going in close to your laptop the whole time. Get a nice video camera, a nice microphone. I'm actually talking on this Blue Yeti microphone right here. And I actually travel with this so that I can have good audio no matter where I am. Good audio makes a difference. And when you go into the professional world, you might run into in an actual office, Polycoms, which is conference calling hardware that is really popular, or some other brands that do the same thing. And of the million times that everybody in all of those has said, oh, I can't hear you, or oh, hey, are you still on the line? I mean, everybody says that because audio is bad. Have good audio. Some other nice to have things, get a noise canceling headset if you're going to be in a noisy environment. There's one I have that I recommend called the Plantronics Voyager 5200. That one is really solid. I've been sitting in airport lounges and in coffee shops next to beans being ground. You can't hear it on the other end. So highly recommend this one if you're going to be in a noisy environment. It's just a courtesy to everybody else in the line. Also makes you more professional. And then if you want to look good on camera and your environment that you're working in doesn't have good light sources, buy a source of light. There's a bunch of like vlogging lighting rigs and things like that that are not that expensive. You can buy on Amazon. You want to look good if you're going to be on camera. So it's a nice thing to do. Cool. A couple other things. So staying productive. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but I just want to go over some of the basics. Use to-do lists. You can see on the right, this is an example. This is what my to-do list looks like, and it's always very full because I have a lot of things to do. But to-do lists are really nice because they help keep you organized. The way I think about to-do lists is that it takes needing to remember things out of your brain so you can use your brain space on other things. And as long as you know that it's in your to-do list, then you can make sure that it gets done. So to-do lists, if you're not already using to-do lists, highly recommend. There's a bunch of to-do lists out there. To be honest, all the big ones are pretty much the same. Like they'll all do the job just fine. I use Asana, which is also project management software. They have a free version too, if you want to use it for yourself. But you could really use anything with a quick Google search that's out there. I also use a calendar to organize my week. And the way I'll use my calendar is I'll schedule work time. So I have a lot of meetings that we'll schedule. And when you're coordinating with other people, make sure to put it on a calendar that so that you know when you have obligations and you know when you're busy and when you're not. But I'll also schedule personal time too. And I do that so that when I'm working from home, I make sure to block off that time and not schedule work things in that time as well. So that's part of the danger with making a clear line between your work time and your personal time when you're working remotely is, well, if you want to spend 3 hours hanging out with somebody else in the house with your your roommate that you live with or your significant other, or maybe you just want to play video games or something, whatever you want to do, if you don't block it off on your calendar, something might come up and inevitably someone's going to say, hey, this is really urgent. Can you handle this project? Can you do this one thing? It's only going to take 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And you'll look at your calendar and you'll say, oh, I'm free then. Let me just throw it in. But then you end up never having time for yourself. So it's a nice little trick to block off your personal time, even on your work calendar, because it prevents you from scheduling things when there's no physical boundary to when you could be working. Two other things. SMART goals. I'll talk more about that in a minute. This is one of the most important things I think that I have learned as far as setting goals and really achieving things. And then lastly, coffee. I mean, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but coffee, I drink a lot of coffee. Coffee is rather important to productivity or your caffeinated beverage of choice. So SMART goals, here's a little bit about this. I think it's really important. I didn't know anything about this until basically starting my career, but essentially a SMART goal it's an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And this is the best way to be productive and achieve things. This applies to your career, this applies to your personal life, this applies to anything that you want to do. Basically, it's saying what you want to do, how you're going to measure success. Is it possible? Maybe you want to be an NBA star, but like if you've not played basketball your entire life and you're 21 or 22, like, is that really realistic? Probably not. It's not really that realistic. It's not really that achievable. And then timely, putting a time frame on it. So like a specific SMART goal for me in the business context might be, I want to get 2 more e-commerce clients to Optimotive by the end of the quarter. So is that specific? Yes, it's 2 more clients. Is it measurable? Yes, it's 0, 1, 2, or 3 or 4 more clients. There's a number of clients, there's a specific number to it. It's definitely achievable, it's definitely realistic, and it's bounded by time. So I'm doing it this quarter. After the quarter is over, it's not possible to do it anymore. So what it does is it focuses you on what you're accomplishing. And so if you're thinking about this and starting a new job, I think you can look at this in 2 ways. The first one would be what you're accomplishing at your company. And some companies do a better job at this than others of making goals realistic and really having a good framework for accomplishing things. but other companies don't. And if you're in a situation where it's not really clear what the outcome of your work is, I think it's a good idea to consider creating goals for yourself or proposing goals to maybe supervisors or people who are managing you, because not only does it help you be productive, but it's a good habit to have in general. So something to think about there. And then also you can apply this to your personal life and like your personal career aspirations too. So if you're starting a new job and you want to get promoted, whatever your goals, you want to get promoted, you want to make more money, you want to learn more, you want to be an expert on something. I mean, this could take a lot of different forms, but if you don't set a goal around it, you're leaving it up to chance. Maybe it's going to happen. It's up to you to make it happen. So this is a good trick to use for that. That's everything for habits. I don't know, Gretchen, you want to add anything to those?
I think the SMART goals is really important. I do like that a lot. And scheduling time, I think, is really important as well to take care of yourself, that self-care. It's a big deal. I know I can get stuck in that, oh, I'll just one more email. Oh, just one more email, one more. And all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock and I'm like, how the heck did that just happen? And why am I so tired? My brain feels like mush because I've been on the computer all day. So scheduling that time has been really important. I am not typically a schedule person, so that took a lot of time for me to get used to. And now, I'm pretty good about it. I know every day I'm, shutting that computer
Good.
for a long walk, or so that for me was the hardest part and definitely the most rewarding part. I love that.
Yeah, because it's really, I mean, when you go to the office, you're such a physical boundary, and especially if, I mean, it's also different if your laptop and you have a work laptop and a work computer. So when it's your personal one too, it's just like it goes with you. So it's really hard to create those strong lines. So yeah. Cool. So all that said, let's jump into what I think is really the meat of this, and one of the most important things about working remotely, and that's communication, which you take for granted a lot of the stuff you do in person. Once you're not in person, you realize all those things. You're like, oh my God, it would actually be really nice, to be working together in an office. I think about that sometimes with my team. And I'm like, when did I want to get into an office? Like, I just became the most corporate sounding person, just saying that out loud. But it's true, because communication's a lot easier when you're in person for a number of reasons. So, the first thing to think about when you're thinking about communication remotely is that there is a hierarchy of communication. Not all communication is equal. And I think there's two good ways in general to sort of think about this. And the first is, how critical is the thing that you're communicating in terms of how you send that message? So is that a phone call? Is that an email? What medium are you going to use to send that? And the other one is what the level of escalation is. So basically put some judgments on how really important is this thing? How much does it matter? Is it that big of a deal that I need to take someone else's time in order to talk about this or communicate in some way with them? It should be pretty important if you're going to involve other people. So as far as the channels of communication go, from most critical to least critical, we've got the list lined up right here. So most critical, always phone call, always a direct phone call. If something's actually truly really important, you pick up the phone and you call that person and you talk about it with them. And I think it's important that everybody is, aligned around this in a company as well, that a phone call is important, so that when you see the phone ringing, you go, oh, that's important. I should pick this up. I should see what's going on. Second, from a phone call, would be a video call, so a Zoom call. And the reason why that's the second most important is because you can see the other person, you can talk to the other person, you get real-time feedback and information about how they're reacting to what you're saying, and you can go back and forth about something rather quickly. Third most critical would be SMS, texting, WhatsApping. It's a little bit higher in critical nature than email, but it's still something that you can send a message and you don't necessarily always expect an instant reply, right? On a phone call, you're talking directly to the person in the moment. When you say something, they hear it instantly. When they say something, you hear it instantly. Same thing on a video call. I'm talking right now. You guys on the call are instantly hearing me and seeing me on video. But for an SMS or for a WhatsApp message, you know, you can send a message and you don't expect a response immediately. There's maybe some exceptions, but most of the time you don't expect a response immediately, and the other person isn't thinking that you expect a response immediately. So those are probably the top 3 channels. Where you go from there when we're looking at email, right? And email is huge in a work context, but email, to be honest, is not necessarily, well, at least I think it shouldn't be reserved for the most important things. Sometimes you'll send critical emails, especially if you know the other person's on their email. But in my opinion, email is something that's, you know, if it's going to be truly important, you should use those other 3 channels of communication. And maybe you'll send an email saying, hey, call me, or hey, let's get on a video call. That's totally fine. And that, I think, is a really valid way to sort of escalate up that hierarchy when something is important, because, you know, you're going to go back and forth on email a million times of something that's really complex, has a lot of parts, where, you know, and people say this all the time, we could just get on a phone call and talk about it, and, you know, it's going to be a lot easier. So email would be the next one down there. I just realized I didn't put it on this list, but like Slack and instant messaging would fall right below the video call and right above SMS and WhatsApp. As well, sort of that instant messenger. I just got a Slack notification actually on my screen as I'm saying that. So Slack would go in there. And then below that, snail mail. I mean, if you're going to send a physical letter, obviously it's going to take some time. And then, you know, if you're going to attempt to communicate something, you write a message and then you delete it, you didn't actually send it, probably wasn't that critical, probably wasn't that important. On the other side, the levels of escalation, everything always seems important in a business context and in a work context. The thing is, I mean, sometimes you talk about things and you're like, that's a good idea, you know, this is just not that much of a priority. But most of the communication you have that, you know, will be in your day-to-day, everything's going to seem important. So I think it's important to recognize that there's different levels of importance, because when somebody says these things to you right here, you should mentally process and realize what they're actually intending to say, which is, you know, okay, this is really important. Let's circle back on it. I mean, if you're going to circle back on it, it's probably not truly important. So in your mind, you can say, well, you know, this is a lower level thing. Yeah, maybe it's important, but I don't need to, you know, put so much emphasis on it right now. You know, it doesn't need to be done tomorrow. As you go through these, let's circle back on it. It's important, but it's a ways out. It's important, and I'm working on it soon. It's important, and I'm working on it now. And then from there, sort of going into what I would say is now getting truly important, which is I need help. It's important. You know, someone saying I need something now, and it's important. Urgently need help, where there's an escalation on, you know, what's being communicated, and then things that are critical, where things are breaking, things are on fire, there are issues, there are problems, they need to be solved critically within minutes, hours, within the day, or something like that. So it's important to realize that everyone thinks their work is important. Everybody thinks that things are important. Not everything is truly important. I think it just helps sanity to realize that, so that you don't have 50 things on your to-do list that are all important. Just a few more details on this. So elaborating on those different hierarchies of communication. What this really means is that you should determine the right communication channel to use based on some of these factors, like what really needs to be communicated. How important is it really? You know, did they say it's important, but let's circle back on it? Well, it's like, well, you probably don't need to call them. You know, you can send an email or something like that. You know, and then some of the other considerations here. How do your colleagues prefer to communicate? How does the person you're talking to prefer to communicate? Because, and I see this all the time, I work with a bunch of different clients, and some of them prefer to just talk on the phone, and they'll just say, call me. Like every email is just call me. But I have other clients where I've thought things were really important, and so I've called them on the phone and they just haven't picked up, and a few seconds later I get an email outlining more details about it. And it's just personal preference on what people like to do. So it's funny sometimes what people prefer to use. All of those communication channels we were just looking at, I use all of them with different clients to different degrees. So except for snail mail, that's mostly a joke. But yeah, I'll talk directly to some clients because that's what they prefer. I'll get on video calls with other ones because that's what they prefer. I text some clients and I WhatsApp some clients. That's the only way that we talk is through WhatsApp because that's just what they prefer. So in a client context, you know, it's very much a business relationship. But even when you're just working with someone, you know, just think about it. Like, how does that person really want to be communicated with? Because that's important. And then also should make sure that you're talking to the right person. So, you know, if say you're working on a project and there's a bunch of people working on the project, it's just a waste of time to send the wrong message to the wrong person. You know, you want to make sure that if you're going to communicate something to somebody, it should be worth their time. So you're not wasting their time. And if they come back and say, oh, you should talk to somebody else about this, it's not wasting your time. Just being efficient, you know, with your communication. And last thing on this, I think this is important to realize the difference between synchronous and asynchronous communication. So all that really is that synchronous communication is stuff where like meetings, phone calls, video calls, where you're directly, you know, there's one-to-one feedback. I'm talking, you're listening in the moment. Asynchronous is stuff that happens, you know, out of sync with real time. So Slack, for example, email, a text message, you know, you can send a message to somebody and it's not expected or really realistic that every time they instantly read it. So this gets mixed up a lot of time. And I think this is maybe something that would improve a lot of people's mental health in a remote work context, of realizing that Slack and email are asynchronous. You know, when someone emails you, you don't always need to respond right away. Now, there are exceptions, and especially for certain types of roles, like and if I'm in a sales context, you know, and I'm talking to somebody trying to win business from them, and they email me on a Saturday, and I see that message, and I know that if I respond in the moment, they'll really appreciate it, and it will help win the deal. Then I'm going to email them back if I have a moment of time. But for most situations and most people, you don't need to necessarily Slack or email back or respond immediately in the moment. It's an asynchronous form of communication. So if somebody messages you late at night because they're in a different time zone and it's not actually that urgent, you don't need to respond to them right away. And then that leads us into the most important rule of remote work, which is to always, always, always pick up the phone and call if it's important. It doesn't matter what's going on. The other person may not answer, but what's important is that you actually escalate to the highest level of communication, which is calling somebody. If you're going to email someone, they might not see it. It's asynchronous. If you Slack someone, maybe they're on, maybe they might not see it, but a phone call is always something that really communicates to somebody else. This is important and I need to talk to you. So I think it's good to have that as the highest level, because then when everybody knows that and you get a call, like, yeah, this is important. Something else that's very important for me, in particular in my business, working with clients, but really just in working in general, is empathy. And this is something that I think does not get talked about enough. And I certainly wish that I had learned more about this in general, you know, in my education before actually really starting my career. And I really look at this as a sixth sense, because this is what, I mean, in my context, I'm working with clients, this is what saves money. This is what saves deals. This is what saves relationships, is having empathy and having that sixth sense. And so what that might look like is, and so I put some of these signals here, say you're talking to somebody, you're on the phone call with somebody you work with, and you just get this feeling that something is off, something feels weird. Or you're on a video call and you notice that maybe you've been working with this person for months, and for some reason, you know, you're just looking at them and they're like, oh, they're not paying attention to the camera, they're doing something else, you know, or their video, maybe their video was on normally for every meeting they've been to, but today it's off, and it's different than normal. And so you look at those signals and you're like, okay, something might be wrong. And it's important to pay attention to those things. And so for me, working with clients that are paying me money, that basically means when I get that feeling that something might be off, I'm like, okay, well, that might mean that you're going to stop paying my company money, and that would obviously be bad. You know, I think we're doing good work. I think we're doing a good job, but things happen that aren't necessarily directly tied to the work, or you might get that perception. So it's important to pay attention to these signals. And I think some people are naturally, you know, through their who they are or just how they've grown up, are naturally more empathetic and might be more tapped into this. But I think for a lot of other people, you know, especially in a business context, people don't think about it this way, and it's really important. So when you're in this situation, then here I put down here a couple different tools for this and a few ways to think about this. Really, number one, don't put off, figuring out what's going on, because it will make things worse. If someone's upset with you, or if someone, doesn't like the project you're working on or something, if you don't talk about it, it's just going to continue, that other person's going to continue feeling like that, and it's just going to cause problems down the line. So anytime you notice something feels off, immediately try to figure out what's going on. Also, never assume what other people are doing or thinking, because you don't know until they tell you, or until you talk about it. And this is the cause of so much conflict in a work environment that gets so much worse when you're working remotely, because you don't get to talk to those people every day. You don't get to see them in person. And there's a lot of little things you do in your in-person interactions that allow you to figure this stuff out. But when you're remote, sometimes this stuff gets missed. And so you might think, well, so like Ben, my business partner, I might think, oh, Ben, he's off just, hanging out, having fun. I didn't really see him on Slack today. I think he's just, just been chilling at home with his housemates. I don't really think he's doing any work today, because I haven't seen him do anything. But he might have just been heads down working on our new legal contract, which is what he was doing the other day, for hours and hours. And he was actually working really hard the whole time. But I don't know, because I didn't see anything. So if I assume, what he was doing or how he was thinking about things, that's not really reality. And then that'll impact our relationship and how we're working together. And then on the flip side, you can't assume that others know what you're doing and what you're thinking, because unless you communicate this to other people, they're not going to necessarily have an idea. Maybe you are working really hard on a project all day, or the whole week or a whole month, and then you come in and into a Zoom call, and you're presenting all these great results and stuff, but nobody really knew that you were working on the project. You don't necessarily know that after that Zoom call, everyone's going to say, wow, that was a great job, great work, I know you're working hard. People might not know. So, you can't necessarily assume what they're thinking about you. And so really what all this gets down to is just being able to have empathy with other people, and tell people what's going on with you, figure out what's going on with other people. And then with that sixth sense, if something feels weird or off, I think the most important thing to do is just call that person immediately. And if you remember what we were saying earlier, with calling someone is the most important, highest level of communication. In a remote context, if something feels off, call that person and figure it out. And I do this all the time. It might be somebody on my team where I was just like, oh yeah, we were on that call with a client, and something just felt off about the way that person on my team was just interacting with that call. So then after the call, pull the phone, I call a person on my team and I say, hey, what's going on? That was kind of weird. Like, is everything okay? And then just figure out, make sure. Sometimes things could be fine. Sometimes, it might be something completely unrelated to work. Like something, you had a fight with your significant other last night and it's just impacting you today. But it's good to know that. So then you can, figure out, well, in a work context, oh, it wasn't really, what we were working on. It was just circumstances. So that's a rather important thing to know. And then, it allows you to work together better as a team. Cool. So all that said, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about looking like the hero. And this is really important if you're starting a new job, because obviously you want to make a good impression. So the important thing to realize with looking good in your workplace is that the perception of work is just as important as they're doing the work itself. And this is even more so important in a remote context, because people don't see that you're working on stuff all the time. And so, when you start a job, you're going to have managers, bosses, people you work with. And the thing is, they will be judging you. It's just part of being human. They're gonna be like, oh, I see that person that I'm working with, and I wonder how they're working. Or maybe you're like, oh, I noticed that they weren't working that much. Or they're gonna say, oh, I noticed that they're working really hard. Or wow, they've been doing some really good work. All these things go through everybody's minds, whether they're conscious of it or not. And so obviously you want to make a good impression. So I have a few tricks here, a few just little things that you can do to create a good impression in a work context. But most importantly, I do want to point out, this is what I'm about to say is not a substitute for actual hard work. You should do good work. You should work hard. You should do a good job. This is not going to help you do that. And, if you don't actually work hard, you're going to not be very fulfilled, and you will probably not get very far in your career and your life. So disclaimer. But that said, the most important thing here is really, and this is why it's about communication, It's about wins, it's about losses, and it's about just being on the same page with people. So one of the key things is communicating your wins and owning your losses. So if you do something in a work context that was good, you got good results. So like for me, if we built a marketing campaign for a client and we drove a lot of business, we drove a lot of sales, I'm going to communicate that to my client. I'm going to send them reports. I'm going to show them nice looking graphs. I'm going to send them emails saying, wow, look at all the sales we got today. Wow, you know, all these things so that they can see that this stuff is happening. Not only do you not necessarily know if they're looking at the same things you are, but you want to make sure that you're on the same page. So communicating your wins is really important, that other people see that you're doing a good job, especially people that are supervisors of you. And then on the flip side, also owning your losses. So if you do something, if you mess up and you cause problems, or you know, you make something break. So like for me, for example, say I launch an update to a website and the website breaks and the website goes offline. Obviously that's not good. But the worst thing to do is just to try to cover it up or make excuses. What you want to do immediately is just say, look, we messed up, or well, what you should really say is I messed up, that's my fault, but we're working on it. We've got a fix in progress. It's going to be done soon. Here's what went wrong. Here's what we're doing to fix it. That's super important. And that makes you look good. Even though you messed up, that also makes you look good because it says that you're owning it and you're on top of it. So a couple perception tricks. These are little things that you can do. I like to call this micro wins. And so I do this in a client context all the time, where if we might not have had like a huge overwhelming success on a marketing campaign that we did for a client, but if we had little wins, like, you know, we just launched a campaign and in a couple of minutes, we got our first sale. It's one sale, it's nothing crazy, but I'll just send that to my client and say, hey, got our first sale. You know, this is great. Or maybe, you know, we saw some good engagement on something that we did. We're seeing a lot of positive responses. Maybe one person left a good review that said something great about a product. And I'll just communicate that and say, hey, look at this cool review we got. You know, wow, this person really loves what they got. Little things like that, just little micro wins, micro bits of positivity, which will help make you look good and also just enhance the perception overall. So that's one little thing. Another thing you can do is over communication. I think this is something, well, obviously you don't want to communicate too much, but if you think about communication in terms of making sure that you over communicate rather than under communicate, it's way better to over communicate than to under communicate. So that people know what's going on with you, know what you're doing, and things of that nature. So if you are constantly giving updates about what you're doing, it'll constantly look like you're doing good work. So it's rather important to do that. Online and offline status. This is something specific to remote work in particular. So there's a lot of different tools like Slack, for example, that we use where you can set your online, offline status. Setting yourself as online is something that other people will see and they'll say, wow, this person's online. So something that I used to do when I was working for somebody else is I actually started working really early. So I like to start my workday at 7 a.m. So I would set myself as online purposefully at 7 a.m. so that anyone who was on would see that I was up early and I was working, and I was up early and I was working. But I could have just left myself offline, but no one would have seen that. So it's a nice little trick. Same thing with being offline. If you want to say go heads down and do some work, but you don't want to look like you're ignoring people, set yourself offline. You know, even if it's in the middle of the day, if you want to basically say, don't bother me, I'm going to work on stuff. It's a nice little trick. You can also schedule emails in advance. I don't know if a lot of you know this, but there's different tools you can use to do this, especially in Gmail, that are free. And it can be a huge thing that, you know, if you're going to schedule emails for, say, early in the morning, maybe you're not actually even up early in the morning, but you can schedule an email to send early in the morning where, so people will say, oh, wow, they sent an email, you know, right before, you know, maybe it's before 9 a.m., it's 8 o'clock, and they sent an email, they're working, they're on top of stuff, but maybe you're not even up. Maybe you scheduled that the evening before. It's a nice little trick. And then also, of course, sharing big wins, share small wins, share your big wins too. You know, you want to share the things that you're proud of. So cool. And then this is another pretty straightforward thing, I think, but communicating across time zones. So maybe the case working remotely that you're communicating with people in other time zones. This is not necessarily specific to remote work, I suppose, but if you're communicating across time zones, I'm assuming you're not in person because they're in a different time zone. So our team right now is in Oregon, Colorado, and a few other states. Our writing team is in a bunch of different states. And then internationally, I'm in the UK right now. Alice on our team is in France, and Pranit is in Serbia. So we have a pretty good spread. It's actually really nice. We're just on the US and European time at the moment, which is doable to coordinate. But at one point we had Pacific time, Mountain time, Western European time, Central European time, and WITA is Bali time. So we basically had a 16-hour difference between everybody's time zones. So that was a pain in the ass to coordinate. And essentially we ended up having one person in, everybody in the US would get on calls really early when we needed to meet as a team. Everyone in Europe would meet at sort of early afternoon, and then everybody in Asia would be coming on at night, and that was kind of how we split it up. That's that's as extreme as it gets. I don't necessarily think most of you will be in that situation, but just to illustrate the point, you know, the key thing is just making sure that there's times everybody's available to meet if you need to coordinate. And a couple simple tricks around this: memorize quick conversion references for the most common time zones you work in. So in the US, it's really easy. It's just a 3-hour spread. So just knowing that you know, East Coast is going to be 3 hours ahead of Pacific time. If you're on Mountain time, it's -1 to Pacific time. It's +1 to Central time. It's +2 to Eastern time. So that you can, you know, in your head really quickly say, oh, hey, you know, maybe you're looking at your calendar, trying to schedule the meeting. You're going to say, oh, you know, are you free at 2 o'clock Eastern? And you're looking at your calendar in Mountain time, knowing that that's noon. So that's a really easy thing you can do. Prioritize times when everyone's available. And then if you're coordinating on stuff for projects, just plan on having an extra day or two to go back and forth and work on things. Because if you send somebody to something to somebody in a different time zone, it's going to take them, you know, some time. If you send it at what's basically their midnight, they're not going to see it and work on it, you know, before the end of your workday. So just know that, you know, the next day they'll see it and they'll work on it. They'll send it back to you. So when you're working on projects, just, you know, keep that in mind. And then also, as far as, you know, this gets into some of the habits that you have, but plan your routine around when people need you. So a lot of the clients that I work with right now are in the US. So I generally have a lot of meetings starting at about this time, actually. So I have a few more meetings after this. And generally, I plan on just having meetings in the mid to late afternoon in my day. And my mornings are usually really open. That was different when I was in the US and when I was in Latin America. I mostly was working and coordinating with people in the morning, and in the afternoon I would have time off. And in Costa Rica, I would just go surf in the afternoon, which is really fun. And now I will not do that because I had meetings in the afternoon. So I know that was a lot. There's a lot to unpack with communication. So I don't know, Gretchen, do you want to add anything to any of those sections?
I think communication is the biggest key when you don't actually work in the same building. It's hard. It can be really hard. Excuse me, being really intentional about checking in with people and how are you, and yeah, talk about the work stuff. That's really important. But also, I mean, going back to that empathy piece that you talked about, how are you? What's going on? Especially in this time, you know, people in this time of uncertainty, and people are scared, and what the heck is going on, and just seeing how people are. It's really important. I know I have appreciated, we have one-on-ones with our boss pretty frequently, and she asked last week, she was like, Gretch, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do Zoom? And I was like, well, and she said, how about the phone? It might be nice to just talk, and, you know, you can wander around and, you know, not be tied to your computer. So really feeling what that other person wants and being in tune with that is really important. I think the hero part, when you talked about voicing your wins, I am so bad about that. I'm so bad about that. And when you're not with your colleagues and with your boss all the time, and they can't see what you're doing, you really have to be able to advocate for yourself. I'm super great about owning my losses. Good God, I can talk all day about, well, I messed this up and I messed that up, and shoot, I wish I would have done that. But being able to talk about all the good things, it is important. So I love that slide, the hero. Absolutely.
Perfect. And I'm realizing, by the way, I just noticed the clock. I have a meeting in 7 minutes, so maybe we'll jump through the rest of this, and then we can see if anybody has questions maybe later. I don't think I'll have time for that right now, but we can talk about that at the end. So we'll jump into the next few pieces here. So team culture. one of the important things, getting to know each other in a remote context. We do things in a particular way. I know every company would be a little different, but what we do is when we're on video calls with each other internally, it's a little different for us as working with clients. So if we're on calls with just everybody in the company and not with clients, we'll talk about our lives. We'll talk about what's going on in our lockdown homes and what's going on outside, how our trip to the grocery store was, we did a wild excursion for the week, all that stuff. We'll just get to know each other on those video calls. It's not just strictly work. We'll talk about what's going on with our day as well. We also will prefer and prioritize voice and video instead of text communications so that we can have those moments where we're actually talking with each other. We spend time talking about non-work things as well, in Slack, on the phone, in the places that we communicate the most. So we make sure not to just have everything be strictly work. Frankly, I think it's boring to just be 100% work all the time. Totally depends on the culture and like where you're working, but that's what I think. We also help each other out if anyone needs anything, and I think everybody on the team knows it's, for work things, of course, we're gonna help each other out, but also on a personal basis, if somebody needs help with something in personal life, like we're there to help each other out. So it's important, I think, to have that kind of culture. And then we also share, personal stories, life updates, things like that with each other when we're talking and when we're doing different things. A few things that you can do, make sure to connect, see if you can connect with people beginning and end of calls. Inevitably, everybody just has some small talk at the beginning of calls. I mean, Gretchen and I were just talking, we got on here. But I think one of the things you can think about is, how to really talk about things with people and not necessarily just talk about like the weather or whatever. I think it's important to talk about other things and really just care about who you're working with. You can also call people you work with outside of scheduled meetings. I think this is important for remote work because I'll call the people on my team all the time. I'll call clients too. Maybe we don't have something scheduled on the calendar where we're supposed to talk about something. That doesn't mean you can't talk to them. You can't call them. And it could be to work on something, or you need some help with something, or it could just be like just seeing how things are going. That's a totally fine reason to talk to somebody too. And sometimes it can be nice to break up your day like that. And then lastly, even when you're working remotely, it's important to try to build rapport with people and build relationships with people. This is probably the most important part of your career, is the relationships that you build with other people that you work with, way more so than the work that you do. I mean, I don't know, maybe you're a genius at inventing something, and you're a genius at coding, and you're the best coder in the world. I don't care. The relationships are still the most important thing, because you can be super smart and have no relationships, and it's not going to get you very far. So something to consider. And I'm moving fast because I only have so much time here. But working with the supervisor remotely, a few things. So there's two things you should focus on. And I have an interesting perspective because I am a supervisor working remotely. Your say-do ratio is rather important. And to be honest, if you just do these two things, you will do very well in your career. So your say-do ratio is, if you say you're going to do something, do you do it? And do not just say you're going to do it. So for everything you say, oh yeah, I'll get on that, I'll do that, or I'll work on that project. Just make sure you actually do it. And then at the same time, having quick confirmations about stuff, as simple as if someone asks you to do something or something is mentioned, just say, I'm working on it, I'll handle this. Okay, I got your email, I'll respond to it later. And then when you do the thing, go back to that person and say, I did it, it's complete, it's done, this thing is ready, or respond to their message or whatever. To be honest, the bar is low. Do these two things and you're in the 1% of workers as far as any management person is concerned. I mean, anyone can learn how to do things. Not everybody does this. So this is super, super important. And really what you can think about as a good rule of thumb is, you never want any supervisor to be thinking, what is this person doing? Like, what am I doing? And am I actually driving results here? Or like working towards the goals or what you're supposed to be working on. So like somebody on my team, if I find myself wondering like what was Alice doing today? Like, was she even doing anything? That's a problem. And I don't think that, because I know what she's doing. I know she's doing good work. So for you as a person working with a supervisor, just make sure that they always know what you're doing, and that you're actually working towards what you're trying to work towards. A couple other things, non-workspace time, talked about this a second ago, but some of the things that we do. We have fun Slack channels that are dedicated to not work things. So when Rona hit and we all started going into lockdown, we launched a new channel for Domestic Cozy to talk about things we're doing in our house. We have some team projects we do together, different things. We also sometimes do remote happy hours where we all get our alcoholic beverage of choice and get on Zoom and just talk about non-work things. So that's what you can see the conversation going on in Slack here. And we actually schedule these. So we put time on the calendar and schedule meetings to not talk about work things. And I think that's a really easy thing that anybody can do when working remotely. And it just helps improve things so much because, it's on the calendar, but it's an obligation to not have any obligations. And it's really nice to set aside that particular space and time for those things. Really, really fast, because I have 1 minute here, some work-life balance on this. So day-to-day routine, take breaks, set expectations with people you're working with on when you're available to work so they don't just think that, you might be available when you're not. Keep a consistent routine, and most importantly, have a routine and optimize it for you and the way that you work. Some people are more productive in the morning. Some people are more productive at night. Some people like to work out in the morning. I like to work out at night. Some people like to cook all their meals, so they want a lot of time in the kitchen around mealtime. Other people, are totally happy to have quick, easy meals and don't really care. You should optimize a routine for yourself based on what you want to do in the day, and then communicate that with the people, and then keep it consistent. Also fit your work time around your meeting obligations, and then orient to time zones if you need to. So I work later, I work past, I work most hours of the day right now actually, but I work past 5 o'clock normally, like when the workday ends, but sometimes I have lazy start. Sometimes I'll sleep in until like 10 o'clock because nobody that I'm working with is up at that time. So something to consider. Nice little calendar hack. You can do something, this is what my calendar looked like a little while ago. I have a lot of things on my calendar. You can do what I like to call deep work blocks. So literally putting on your calendar a block for deep work, which is just setting aside time for you to do projects and not get on meetings with other people. What ends up happening is that when you go to schedule something, you'll see your work block. You'll say, actually, I'll schedule it at a different time. Instead of this time, and that allows you to have that time to work on projects instead of getting pulled into more meetings. This is good if you're in a lot of meetings. Another browser hack, you can have separate profiles in Chrome so what you can do is you can separate out one profile for work and one profile for your personal stuff, which allows you to have like a separate environment on your computer for work and personal things. It's a really nice little trick that you can do. And then lastly, use your notifications, turn off those notifications if you don't want to be bothered, turn them on if you're available to talk to people. Simple, simple thing. And that's pretty much it. If you guys have questions, I thought we were gonna do some Q&A, but then I realized that there's actually kind of a lot that we want to talk about here today. You can shoot me an email. I think we'll send this deck to you guys. And we'll send you my information also. Just shoot me an email. Happy to help if you guys have any questions. And yeah, just do what I can.
Andrew, you're amazing. Thank you. I know you have to run, but thank you for all of life. You are the best.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you. And
right.
Yeah, I hope everybody has a good graduation.
Great. We'll see you soon, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.